I want you to imagine something that might sound impossible. Imagine having a mother and a father who love you. Imagine having a sister. Imagine having around 30 friends, people you laugh with, joke with, walk home with every day. And now imagine that, in spite of all those people, you feel completely, painfully alone. So alone that one day you decide to do something strange. You decide to invent a friend. You give this friend a name and you start writing letters to this friend, even though this friend is not a real person at all. That is exactly what a young girl did. Her name was Anne Frank. She was just 13 years old. The friend she invented was her diary, and she gave it the name Kitty. And here is the part that gives this story its power. That little diary, those private letters to an imaginary friend, went on to become one of the most read, most loved, and most important books in the entire history of the world. In this video, we are going to go deep. This is a long one because this chapter deserves it. I'm going to give you the full background of who Anne Frank was and the terrible time she lived in, so the chapter actually makes sense. Then we will go through the chapter itself, slowly and simply. We will study every character, we will cover every theme, and we will go through all the important exam questions with model answers. By the end, you will understand this chapter more deeply than most people ever do, and you will be fully ready for your board exam. So settle in and let's begin. And if you find this helpful along the way, please tap that like button. It really does help me reach more students who need this. Let's dive into it. To understand this chapter, you first have to understand the world Anne lived in, because it is the shadow behind every single line she wrote. Anne Frank was born on the 12th of June 929 in a country called Germany, in a city called Frankfurt. She was a Jewish girl. Now, being Jewish simply means belonging to a particular religion and community. For most of history, that was a perfectly ordinary thing to be. But during Anne's childhood, something terrible was happening in Germany. A man named Adolf Hitler had come to power. Hitler and his political party, the Nazis, believed a horrible and completely false idea. They believed that Jewish people were to blame for their country's problems, and they began to hate and persecute them. Persecute means to treat cruelly and unfairly again and again just because of who you are. Slowly, Jewish families lost their rights, they lost their jobs, they lost their safety, and it got worse and worse. Because of this growing danger, when Anne was a small child, her family made a decision to leave Germany. They moved to a safer country nearby called Holland, also known as the Netherlands, to a city called Amsterdam. For a few years, they were safe there. Anne grew up in Amsterdam, went to school there, made friends there, and learned to speak Dutch. For a while, life was almost normal. But then, the danger followed them. A huge war, the Second World War, broke out. Hitler's army invaded and took control of Holland too, and now the Frank family was trapped. The same cruelty they had run away from in Germany had caught up with them in Amsterdam. Jewish people were being rounded up and taken away to terrible camps. So the Frank family made a desperate choice. In July 1942, when Anne was 13, they went into hiding. They hid in a set of secret rooms hidden behind Anne's father's office building. These hidden rooms are famously known as the Secret Annexe. To reach them, you had to go through a doorway that was hidden behind a movable bookcase. Can you imagine that? A family living behind a bookcase in silence, hardly daring to make a sound, for 2 long years. Anne, her parents, her sister, and 4 other people all hid together in that cramped, secret space. And it was during this frightening time that Anne poured her heart into her diary. The diary became her escape, her comfort, and her only truly free space, a place where she could say anything she felt. Now I have to tell you the sad part because you should know it and because it is often asked in exams. After about 2 years in hiding, the family was betrayed. Someone gave away their secret. The soldiers came, and the family was captured and sent away to the concentration camps, the very places they had been hiding from. It was one of the darkest crimes in human history, in which millions of Jewish people were killed. This is known as the Holocaust. Anne Frank died in one of those camps from an illness called typhus in early 1945. She was only 15 years old. Out of all the people who had hidden in that secret annex, only one person survived: Anne's father, Otto Frank. After the war ended, Otto returned to Amsterdam, broken by grief, and there he was given something that had been saved: Anne's diary. He read his daughter's private words, and he realized what a remarkable, wise, and beautiful record it was. So he decided to share it with the world. He had it published as a book called The Diary of a Young Girl, and that is why, all these years later, you and I can read Anne's words in your Class 10 textbook. A young girl who died at 15 speaks to us still through her diary. Take a moment to think about why this book became so important. It is because Anne's diary shows us the giant tragedy of the war, not through big numbers and dates, but through the eyes of one ordinary girl. We see her fears, her jokes, her dreams, her arguments with her mother, her crushes, her hopes for the future. She was described as having the mind of someone far older and wiser than her years. Through Anne, millions of readers finally understood what that dark time really cost, one human heart at a time. Now that you understand the world behind the chapter itself will make complete sense. So let's get into the actual text you have to study. The chapter you study is taken from the early part of the diary, written around the time just before the family went into hiding, and it opens with Anne thinking about a strange feeling. She wonders why she, a 13-year-old girl, is even bothering to write a diary. She feels that neither she nor anyone else would be interested in the everyday thoughts of a schoolgirl. It seems a bit silly to her. But then she explains her real reason, and it is one of the most touching ideas in the whole chapter. She does not really want to just record events and facts. She wants something deeper. She wants to pour out her heart. She has feelings inside her that she cannot share with anyone around her, and she needs somewhere to put them. So the diary is not really about recording her day, it is about having somewhere to finally be honest. And this leads to the single most famous line in the chapter, a line you should absolutely remember. Anne writes that paper has more patience than people. Let's really understand what she means because it is beautiful. Think about what happens when you try to share your deepest feelings with a person. They might get bored, they might interrupt you, they might judge you, or laugh at you, or change the subject, or simply not understand. People run out of patience. But a sheet of paper, paper never interrupts, paper never judges, Paper never gets bored or tired of you. You can write anything, everything, and the paper will patiently hold it all without a single word of complaint. So when Anne says paper has more patience than people, she is telling us why she trusts the diary more than she trusts the humans in her life. That one small sentence carries her whole loneliness inside it. Now, this brings us to the heart of Anne's emotional world, and it is something so many students secretly relate to. Anne makes it very clear that she is not lonely because she has no people. Quite the opposite. She says she has loving parents, she has a 16-year-old sister, she says she has about 30 people she can call friends. She has admirers who cannot take their eyes off her in class. By all appearances, her life is full of people. And yet, she says, when it comes to true friends, she has none. Let that sink in. She is surrounded by people, but she feels unseen and unknown by all of them. She explains that with her friends, all they ever do is have a good time, joke around, and talk about everyday, ordinary things. They never seem to get any closer than that. They never reach the deeper things, the real feelings, the private thoughts. And that, she realizes, is the problem. Being fun to be around is not the same as being truly understood. This is such an important and mature idea, and it is a favorite theme for exam questions. Anne teaches us the difference between simply having company and having a true friend. A true friend is someone you can open your heart to completely, and because Anne could not find that in any person around her, she decided to find it in her diary. So Anne makes a decision. She will not treat the diary like a cold, ordinary notebook where you just jot down what happened. That is not enough for her. She wants a real friend, so she does something wonderful. She decides to imagine the diary as a living person, a friend she can actually talk to, and she gives this friend a name. She calls her Kitty. From then on, she does not just write notes, she writes letters to Kitty. She tells Kitty her stories the way you would talk to your closest friend. This is why, throughout the diary, you will see her addressing Kitty directly. Kitty is the patient, understanding, never judging friend that Anne could not find in the real world. When an exam asks why Anne names her diary Kitty, the answer is simple and lovely: to turn it into a real, trusted friend she could confide in rather than a plain record of facts. Now, because Anne is treating Kitty like a real new friend, she feels she cannot just launch into her stories out of nowhere. A new friend would not understand her life without some background. So, very sweetly, Anne decides to give Kitty a short introduction to her family and her life first. It is exactly what you would do when telling a new friend about yourself. She tells Kitty about her father, whom she adores. She calls him the most adorable father she has ever seen. You can feel the love in those words. She mentions her mother and her older sister, Margot. She gives a little of her family history, how they came from Germany and settled in Holland, and she writes tenderly about her grandmother, whom she loved very deeply and who had passed away not long before. There is real sadness when she mentions her grandmother because she misses her. This family sketch matters because it shows how thoughtful and caring Anne is, and it gives us a picture of the loving family around her, which makes everything that happens later even more heartbreaking. Now the chapter moves to school, and this is where it becomes surprisingly light and funny, which is part of what makes Anne so special. Even while writing in serious times, She shares a funny, ordinary school story full of life and mischief. Anne tells Kitty about her class and her teachers, and she is honest about herself in a very charming way. She admits that she has one particular habit that keeps getting her into trouble. She talks a lot. She is a real chatterbox. She simply cannot stop talking in class, no matter how many times she is told. That teacher was Mr. Keesing, her mathematics teacher, and describes him as old fashioned and strict. In fact, she cheekily calls him an old fogey, which is a playful way of calling someone an old fashioned, fussy person. Mr. Keesing was the kind of teacher who did not tolerate too much chatter in his class. And of course, Anne, being Anne, kept talking through his lessons. This annoyed Mr. Keesing more and more. He kept warning her, but the talking continued. So finally, he decided to punish her and he gave her extra homework, an essay to write. The subject Mr. Keesing set for her first punishment essay was a chatterbox. He wanted Anne to write about her own bad habit of talking too much. He probably expected her to feel embarrassed and to promise to stop. But Anne was far too clever and witty for that. Anne sat down and came up with a brilliant argument. In her essay, she argued that talking is a natural quality of a student, a girl in particular. She wrote that she would certainly try to control it, but she could probably never fully cure herself of the habit because she had inherited it from her mother, who talked just as much, and you cannot really do much about something you have inherited, can you? Mr. Keesing had a good laugh at her arguments, but Anne did not stop talking, so Mr. Keesing was not finished. Since Anne kept right on talking in the next class, Mr. Keesing assigned a second essay. This time, the subject was an incorrigible chatterbox. The word incorrigible means someone who cannot be corrected or reformed, a habit so strong it simply cannot be fixed. Anne wrote this second essay too, once again defending herself with her clever arguments. And for 2 lessons after that, Mr. Keesing was satisfied and let it go. But then, in the third lesson, Anne once again could not keep quiet. And this time, Mr. Keesing decided he had had enough. Let's take one quick break right here because the best part of the story is coming up next. Everything in this video, the full summary, the characters, the themes, and the important questions, is written out for you in a free PDF, and the link is in the description below and in the pinned comment. If you would rather revise from clean, simple notes instead of pausing the video, just go and download it. It is completely free. Okay, now let's get to the funniest and cleverest moment in the whole chapter. For the third punishment, Mr. Keesing decided to have some fun at Anne's expense. He gave her a ridiculous, mocking subject, hoping to embarrass her in front of everyone. The subject was Quack, 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 said Mistress Chatterbox. He was basically comparing Anne's non-stop talking to the endless quacking of a duck. But Anne was not going to be beaten so easily. Her friend, a girl named Sana, who was good at poetry, offered to help her write the whole essay in the form of a poem. So together, they wrote the essay as a funny poem about a mother duck and a father swan who had 3 baby ducklings, where the father swan bites the ducklings because they quack too much. It was cheeky and clever because Anne was slyly comparing the situation to Mr. Keesing scolding the students for talking too much. Just think about the confidence and the cleverness of that. A teacher tries to embarrass a student with a silly topic, and the student responds with such wit and imagination that she turns the whole thing into a joke of her own. That takes real intelligence and a real sense of humor. Now, here comes the lovely ending to this whole episode. When Anne handed in her poem, Mr. Keesing read it. And how did he react? Did he get angry? No. Mr. Keesing took the joke in exactly the right spirit. He understood that it was clever and funny, and he actually appreciated it. In fact, he read Anne's poem aloud to the whole class and to several other classes as well, adding his own comments. And from that point on, something changed between them. Mr. Keesing became more relaxed with Anne. He allowed her to talk and did not assign her any more punishment essays. The strict teacher and the talkative student had reached a happy, friendly understanding, all thanks to a clever poem about ducks. Now, let's slow down and really study the characters because character questions are extremely common in exams. Let's start with Anne herself. First, Anne is deeply honest. Look at how openly she admits her own faults, her endless talking, her loneliness, her weaknesses. She hides nothing from her diary. Second, she is sensitive and thoughtful. She feels things deeply. She notices the difference between shallow fun and true friendship, something many adults never figure out. She misses her grandmother. She craves real connection. She has a rich inner world. Third, and this is a big one, she is witty and full of humor. The whole Mr. Keesing episode shows a girl bursting with cleverness and fun. Fourth, she is intelligent and mature beyond her years. The way she reflects on life, on friendship, on human nature shows a mind far older than 13. And fifth, she is brave and hopeful. Remember, all of this cleverness and humor is happening during one of the darkest times in history. To stay funny, curious, and full of life in such fear takes real courage. So when you describe Anne, use these words: honest, sensitive, witty, intelligent, and brave, and always give a small example for each. Now, let's look at Mr. Keesing because he is more than just a strict teacher. At first, he seems like a stern, old fashioned disciplinarian, someone who is annoyed by chatter and hands out punishments. But watch how he grows over the episode. When Anne responds to his punishments with wit rather than fear, he does not crush her. He appreciates her cleverness. He reads her poem aloud and enjoys it. He starts joking with her. This tells us that underneath the strictness, Mr. Keesing is actually a fair, good humored, and understanding man. So, in an answer, describe him as strict but fair, with a good sense of humor, a teacher who ultimately understands and appreciates his student. Now, let's gather up the big themes, because themes are where the real marks live in longer answers. The first and biggest theme is loneliness and the longing for a true friend. Anne is surrounded by people yet feels unseen, and this drives her to create Kitty. The second theme is the power of writing. For Anne, writing is not a school task, it is a lifeline where she is free, honest, and safe. The third theme is wit, humor, and the human spirit. Even in dark times, Anne finds room to laugh and to be clever. And the fourth theme, always present in the background, is the shadow of war and the loss of innocence. That contrast, the innocent, everyday life set against the darkness of the Holocaust, is what gives the whole diary its heartbreaking power. Now let's turn all of this into exam marks. First, the short answer questions. Why did Anne Frank keep a diary? Because she felt lonely and had no true friend to share her deepest feelings with. So she made the diary her confidant, believing paper had more patience than people. Why does Anne provide a brief sketch of her family? Because she is treating the diary, Kitty, as a real new friend, and she wants to introduce her family so that her stories will make sense. Who was Mr. Keesing, and why was he annoyed with Anne? Mr. Keesing was Anne's strict mathematics teacher, and he was annoyed because Anne talked far too much in his class. Now, the long answers, worth 5 or 6 marks. Use the structure I always give you: direct answer first, then explanation, then a closing thought. Anne says, paper has more patience than people. What does she mean? And what does it reveal about her? Open directly. Anne means that a diary listens patiently in a way people cannot. Then explain. People often get bored, judge, or interrupt when you share your feelings, but paper never does. So Anne trusts the diary with the thoughts she cannot share with anyone else. Then close. This reveals her deep loneliness and her longing for a true friend who will simply listen and understand. Describe the Mr. Keesing episode and what it tells us about Anne. Open directly. The Mr. Keesing episode shows Anne's remarkable wit and confidence. Then explain. Punished with essays for talking too much, Anne cleverly defended herself each time. And for the mocking duck topic, she wrote a witty poem with her friend Sana's help that turned the joke back on the teacher. Then close. It reveals that Anne was intelligent, humorous, and brave enough to meet punishment with cleverness rather than fear, and it even won her Mr. Keesing's friendship. Boards may also ask a value based question like, what qualities of Anne can today's students learn from? Answer that by naming qualities: honesty, optimism, humor, and the habit of expressing feelings through writing, and connect each to the chapter. For example, her habit of writing teaches us a healthy way to deal with our emotions. And for extract based questions, first identify the moment. Is it the loneliness reflection, the paper patience line, or the Mr. Keesing episode? And then answer using the ideas we have covered. Because you now understand the chapter so deeply, no extract can surprise you. Let me give you one more gift, a ready formula for the very common question. Describe the character of Anne Frank. Start by saying Anne was a sensitive, intelligent, and witty 13-year-old girl. Then take 3 or 4 qualities and give an example for each. Honest, because she openly admits her faults; lonely, yet longing for connection, because she felt friendless despite having many friends; witty and clever, because of her essays and the duck poem; and brave and hopeful, because she stayed cheerful in frightening times. Quality plus example, quality plus example. That structure gives a full, rich character answer every time. Let's bring it all together. Anne Frank was a Jewish girl who, during the Second World War, went into hiding from the Nazis and poured her heart into a diary she named Kitty. She wrote because she felt deeply lonely, believing paper has more patience than people. She introduced her loving family to Kitty and then shared her funny school story about her strict teacher, Mr. Keesing, who punished her talking with essays until her clever duck poem won him over. The great themes are loneliness and true friendship, the power of writing, wit and the human spirit, and the shadow of war. And Anne herself stands out as honest, sensitive, witty, intelligent, and brave. Let me tell you one more piece of the story because it is almost a miracle. When the family was captured and taken away, Anne's diary was left behind in the secret annex, scattered on the floor. Now, a kind family friend, one of the brave people who had helped hide the family and bring them food, quietly gathered up Anne's papers and kept them safe, hoping to return them to Anne one day. But Anne never came back. So when the war ended and her father Otto returned alone, that friend handed him the diary. If she had not saved those pages, the whole world would never have known Anne Frank. One small act of kindness by one ordinary person preserved one of the most important books in history. And when Otto read it, he was astonished. He had known Anne as his cheerful young daughter, but in the diary he discovered a thoughtful, wise, and gifted writer he had never fully seen. He felt the world needed to read her words, and so he had them published. Anne had once written in her diary that she wanted to go on living even after her death through her writing. In a way that most people could never dream of, her wish came true. Let's return to Anne's loneliness and understand it even more deeply because it is the emotional core of the chapter. It is easy to think, well, she had friends, so what is the problem? But Anne is describing a very specific kind of loneliness, the loneliness of not being truly known. She had people to laugh with, but not people to truly open up to. She could joke about films and hobbies with her friends, but she could not talk to them about her deepest fears, her private hopes. So the loneliness was not about being physically alone, it was about carrying a whole inner world that no one else could see. That is why a patient, silent diary became the perfect friend. It could receive that whole inner world without ever turning away. One thing I really want you to notice is what a natural writer Anne was. Look at how she writes. She is honest, she is funny, she notices small details, and she has a gift for turning ordinary moments, a maths class, a punishment essay, into a story that grips you. She could laugh at herself. She could argue cleverly. She could feel deeply. That combination, humor, honesty, and sharp observation, is exactly what makes a great writer, and Anne had it at just 13. So when you describe her, do not only call her lonely, also call her gifted, because her writing is the whole reason we are studying her at all. Let me help you picture the life Anne was living as she wrote, because it makes every light-hearted line more moving. In that secret annex, 8 people in total shared that cramped hidden space. Her family of 4 and 4 others, all crowded together for 2 long years. They had to be silent through the day so that the workers in the building below would not hear them. They could not step outside. They could not look freely out of a window. Imagine being a lively, talkative teenager, the very chatterbox we have been laughing about, and then having to live in whispers, in hiding for 2 years. That is the reality behind the diary. She turned a tiny, fearful hiding place into a space of imagination and honesty through nothing but a pen and paper. You might wonder about something. If Anne is most famous for the time in hiding, why does the chapter in your book focus on her school, her friends, and her teacher, Mr. Keesing? Here is the answer. The chapter comes from the early part of the diary, from the days just before the family disappeared into hiding. It gives us a picture of Anne as a completely ordinary, happy schoolgirl worrying about talking too much in maths class, joking with friends, writing cheeky poems. That ordinary happiness is the whole point. She was a normal student with a normal life until history swept it all away. When we read about her funny school days and then remember what was about to happen to her, the contrast breaks your heart. So, what is the deeper message of this chapter? There are a few beautiful lessons here. The first is the value of expressing your feelings. When you're troubled or lonely, writing your feelings down can be a real comfort and a real friend. The second lesson is about true friendship. A real friend is not just someone to have fun with, but someone you can be fully honest with. The third is the power of a positive, humorous spirit. Even in fear and hardship, Anne stayed clever and cheerful. And the final, quiet lesson is about the value of every human life. A young girl who thought her thoughts did not matter ended up touching the whole world. Never believe that your voice, your story, or your feelings do not matter. And here is the thought I want to leave you with. A 13-year-old girl, feeling alone, sat down and wrote letters to a friend who did not even exist. She thought no one would ever care about her ordinary thoughts. And yet, her honest words have now been read by millions and millions of people in almost every language on earth. Her diary reminds us that every single human life, every ordinary heart, matters more than we can imagine. That is why the world will never forget Anne Frank. And with that, we have completed the whole first flight series together. Thank you so much for studying with me all the way to the end. Go and get those free notes from the description, revise well, and walk into your board exam with confidence. You have done the hard work. You have got this.